You know, Begotten is one of those movies I really don't know how I feel about. I've watched it over a dozen times at least, taken tons of notes on it, analyzed every scene multiple times over, and I don't know, man, it's just a movie that I think I love to hate, but hate to love. Like your mom, because much like this movie, she's pretty gross and edgy, but has a weird amount of personality and depth. And I'm not talking about that kind of depth. In reality, I think Begotten is a truly interesting film, and while I can't recommend it to anyone without giving them some heavy warnings of what to expect for the film, I think ultimately it's a film worth looking into for those who want to get into avant-garde art, or films that are made in a unique way. Truly, there's nothing quite like it, and I don't know if that's because this movie is so different, brutal, and hard to watch, or because expressionist films have sort of died off in popularity. I'm willing to bet it's a bit of both, honestly, but I also think it's because this kind of film doesn't translate into the modern age. No, I don't mean, ew, it's in black and white kind of bad translation. I mean, this kind of storytelling and presentation is... let's be real, it's some pretty pretentious shit. And this is coming from the king of goths, okay, who wrote poetry in their own blood. I can't recommend that, by the way, the blood will dry out over time and it sticks the paper shut. It sounds so out there, neckbeardy, and twatty, but it's true. This is a movie designed for people who are on the inside of outside art. I can't recommend something like Early Burzum to someone who just discovered Enter Sandman and wants to start their journey into metal, okay? It doesn't work that way. No, you're gonna, you want to ease people into this kind of stuff with some entry-level things first, and then give them the big pile of meat to eat from. This isn't some copium on my end as a goth, like how morons will say Big Bang Theory is a smart show. Plot twist, it's not. It appeals to people who smell like soggy ass. No, this is a film that was meant to be broken down at a molecular level for those who want to sink their teeth into something unique and boundary pushing. It was meant to be shocking on the surface level to get the dum-dums to feel gross, get out of the sandbox, and reach for their safety blankets. I mean, this is something that was meant to be lingering in your mind long after you watched it, for one reason or the other. I can't say too much on my own personal experience with this film just yet, but I only came across it when I was working on my Silent Hill 2 breakdown, which you totally watched because you're an awesome person and have a heart of gold. Not to spoil too much for the later parts of this video, but I've got the long hard road out of hell behind me next to my Bible, so you'd think in all my truly infinite wisdom I'd have at least heard of this film, but I hadn't. So I did the next best thing and went on YouTube to find the full film so I could apply the least amount of effort into supporting a creative person's work for the maximum amount of convenience possible, and, well, without spoiling anything yet again, I was kinda underwhelmed, to be honest. It probably didn't help that I watched this on my phone because I could feel David Lynch breathing down my neck at every second that went by, but every minute felt like an eternity. And if I'm honest, I didn't even read the Wikipedia article for the film, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, but I really didn't have any idea that I was in for this kind of a film. Which, if you haven't done a compulsory check right about now about the film because you're a fucking zoomer and I haven't gotten your attention yet, you might actually know that might be a good idea to see if this is the kind of film you want to actually subject yourself to, and I do mean the word subject because this movie doesn't exactly play around. Also, before we get into the film and my thoughts on it, I'd like to take a few minutes to do some basic explaining about myself if you're new. Firstly, I'm the only subscription you need on YouTube, so please do yourself and the world a favor and unsubscribe from whatever shithouse creator you've probably subjected yourself to for way too long, and get ready to have your mind blown by the most incredible person on the planet, right? Secondly, I'm not a film person, like, at all. I studied film analysis for years, but my strength lies in writing and photography, so my personal bias with film is fairly neutral to non-existent. Thirdly, I used to be a drama and theater student, so my perception of this film is much more open and accepting because, well, I'll get into that later on in the analysis. If it also isn't clear by now, based on my colorful rainbow-like language, I'm not a person who believes in censorship, but this is a very rough film, and I'm going to have to do some very clever editing on my own end, despite my own personal hang-ups about censorship. While I'm at it, the themes of this film involve extreme violence, sexual assault, and just plain old basic sex, and some other stuff your parents might get mad at you for bringing up or doing at the dinner table. I detest other YouTubers that look into this movie and just fixate on the graphic nature like 12-year-olds and dismiss this movie as boring or having nothing of value in it. You're entitled to not like this movie, I really don't blame you, but if you're going to expect me to be like some hackney Wikipedia copying clickbait crap out, that's not me, and I genuinely consider those other creators beneath me, and if you don't like that confidence, good. Someone needed to tell them that sooner or later, that their videos are shit and they lack conviction. Looking at this movie and just going, ew, it's gross, look at that, with nothing more to say is exactly the kind of smooth-brained shit that I'm against as a real creator, and once you're ready to take this movie seriously like a grown-up, you'll feel a whole lot smarter. Like me, and that's totally what you want, right? If you want a good breakdown of this film, by the way, from a grown-up, like me, and not some talentless hack like Unleash the Ghouls or Spooky Rice, I can strongly suggest the video Film Analysis Begotten, Philosophy on Film by Rochester. He's got a voice that's smoother than mine and the accent to boot, so go check out his video first, because he's a wonderful creator and gave me hope in regards to people taking this movie seriously. And he really inspired me to make this video, so thanks, mate. I owe you a beer, or coffee, or whatever beverage British people drink is. I'd also like to thank you, yes, you, for watching this video and being a great person for not clicking off the video after I just called out other much more popular creators than me, so either you really hate my guts right now and are spite watching to write up a vitriolic essay at the end of this, or you really don't mind me all that much and know I'm only 99% serious about my petty dislike of other more popular creators than me. If you're also familiar with my Silent Hill 2 series, this is going to seem a little bit similar in structure, so if you're getting some deja vu right about now, you're not going crazy. I just am very basic in terms of editing, and I feel my strength mainly lies in my writing and presentation ability. All the music is produced by me as well and will be uploaded at the end of the series, so if you want to listen to that, go ahead. It's going to be up there eventually. Oh, and I'll try to be as descriptive and non-visual as possible, so if you're like me and mainly listen to other stuff while you have your eyes doing something else, like, checking weirdos out on the bus, you don't have to keep your eyes glued to the screen. You can just do whatever you want. We all have farming and Slayer grinds to do in RuneScape, okay? I totally get it. You gotta get your DWH, man. I know those shamans hop around an awful lot. I'd also like to preface, as this is a film and I'm not exactly as familiar with how the YouTube copyright system reacts every single week, this is all done in fair use and I do not own the rights to the film. All the clips and the audio from the film are not made by me, and I am genuinely using all my sources in fair use as a critic and reviewer, so if there are any issues, hey, YouTube, get your shit together and don't target me because I'm a smaller channel and I say the fuck word. Go after the people that uploaded the whole film that I'm, initially was using at the beginning of this process before I actually bought the whole movie, and then, I used it to, totally put it into Sony Vegas and then burn it to a DVD that I put next to my $400 Amazon statue that I bought during the writing process of this video. Piracy is bad. You go to hell before you die. I don't care if you use an ad blocker either if this video somehow gets ads on it someday in the future, but if you want to throw some support, I have a Patreon in the description, as I believe in artistic integrity, and I'll never take one of those sketchy sponsors just to appease some fossilized boomer that runs YouTube's broken system. I make art on my own, and, I do all this stuff out of personal passion, not to extract money from people, and I already work a full-time job. Oh, and speaking of sketchy sponsors, Manscaped was actually, going to pay me quite a bit to sponsor them for this video, but I told the contract agent I felt it was kind of against the nature of the film, so that's why the production quality is so low, if you're curious. That was a clever joke, by the way, and you're shit if you didn't laugh. That's you. You're the shit, and not the good kind. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy, so let's go ahead and get started. So let's talk a little bit about the film's history, and I do mean a little bit, like less than the previous 2,000 or so words, because I'm gonna be real, I don't really care about the bullshit things like budget, critical acclaim, or anything like that. If you do, I'm sorry. I'm gonna keep this section as brief as possible to avoid spoiling not only my interpretation video, but also bits of my final thoughts on the film. So, Begotten was produced and filmed by director Edmund Elias Merhige and was screened at both the Montreal World Film Festival and San Francisco International Film Festival in 1989. Merhige was also the founder of his own theater group in New York called Theater of Material, where most of the cast and production crew came from for this film. While the timeline of the film's creation has some conflicting information that's changed from interview to interview, it's fairly safe to say that the film only took a few months to shoot, with most of the production time being spent on the editing and rehearsal process. Needless to say, yeah, this movie is about as low budget as it can realistically get, but that's not a bad thing, honestly, because I think there's a certain charm to things made with a restricted or non-existent budget, and the dedication and love that's put into this film is just incredible when you really look at it. Believe me, as an ex-theater student, Merhige's joy for this work it's just infectious, man. It really is, and it makes me grin when I think about it. Merhige filmed most of the shots of Begotten on a construction site between New York and New Jersey for barely a month, with little help from anyone but his own theater group and a few of the construction workers who wanted to help out, and nobody walked away from this film with fast stacks of cash, man. I can see some idiot thinking that sounds like a waste of time, but realistically, art like this it isn't about making money, period. It's about taking your ideas and translating them into something visual for the sake of just doing it. Theater people are weird like that, man. Trust me, when I was in high school, if you told me I could just go ham with a video camera in the woods and a few friends, dude, I would have jumped at the opportunity in a heartbeat just to see what I could make. Like I said, I have a lot to say on the film's production later on, and I really don't want to spoil it, so let's move on to the stuff that actually matters and why you're here in the first place, the actual movie. Once more, before I start, I swear, if you're here just to poke fun at the film for being weird and artsy and lack the emotional maturity to handle this kind of analysis, kindly fuck off and do all the grown-ups in the room a favor. Please, okay? I said please, so you know I mean business. Anyways, Begotten starts off with a text interlude which I'll read now and discuss in detail later. Language bearers, photographers, diary makers, you with your memory are dead, frozen. Lost in a present that never stops passing. Here lives the incantation of matter, a language forever. Like a flame burning away the darkness, life is flesh on bone, convulsing above the ground. Our first real shot of the film is an eyeball with the sound of the ambient overture picking up with some wind. I've seen some people interpret this eyeball as a swan, but trust me, based on my time with the film and something I'll discuss later, it's an eye. And every scene in this has some sort of message behind it, but we'll talk about this all later. We then see the title of the film and get introduced to a shot of a lake and some calming nature tones before the shot of what I'll refer to as the house. There are several locations in the film and several time lapses as well, so to make some sort of sense out of all this, I'll be calling certain events, characters, and locations very specific things for clarity. We then get a glimpse into the door frame and we see one of the main characters of the film, God. Now, if you're curious, the character is credited as God killing himself, but that's way too many words and way too pretentious, so from this point on in the film, anytime I discuss this character, he's just going to be called God for brevity. Before we can say, howdy neighbor, blood starts hitting the side of the room and God starts to convulse and spew blood from his face mask. It's also worth noting that we can see God is in a wheelchair as well, which, yeah, you guessed it, I'll be bringing this up later in the interpretation section, so if you haven't deduced this yet, there's a lot of little things, put into this film that make it very interesting, and it's really fun to look out for the hidden different undertones and meanings. So, some are open for discussion, but quite a few are actually set in stone with their meanings, which I'll, like I said, discuss later on based on what Merhige has named certain scenes. I'll stop saying this at this point and allow you, the viewer, to observe these scenes to come to your own conclusions before I talk about mine. We cut to a close-up of God's mouth inside the mask as well as a close-up of his eye observing the room before we get some cool shots of the house and then back to some eye shots. If you couldn't tell by now either, this film has a thick layer of ambient tones that, by the way, it's got 2 C's and I'll highlight it right here. There's also no spoken dialogue either, by the way, and this entire film is just natural tones from the world and characters with the occasional bit of the soundtrack thrown in. The next scene is probably the film's most infamous and uncomfortable moment as well, so if you haven't got the hint that Begotten is a visceral and brutal film, well, here's your first real test as a viewer. Mind you, if you're going to take this movie seriously, please, for the love of God killing himself, don't act like a 12-year-old and realize this all actually has context. And if you're one of those people that just likes to see brutality for the sake of brutality, you gotta get yourself some help, man. Seriously. God draws a straight razor and begins to rip at himself, throwing flesh to the floor. And this is where you'll start to notice something about this movie that is both a pro and a con in my mind. Scenes in Begotten tend to last a few minutes at a time, generally showing repetitious actions at different angles. While this is obviously a film and it has to have some runtime, this is where most people go, okay, this movie's boring, and I can see where you're coming from, man, I really can. But at the same time, I think one of the main reasons scenes draw out is to draw the audience in and make them engage with what's on screen on a psychological level because of the lack of dialogue. It's actually really effective at firing parts of your animal brain to try and make sense of what you're seeing, like a bad acid trip or a weird dream. It's really quite a subtle and impressive film technique if you ask me. After a few more chunks of flesh hit the floor, God slowly fades into death and we get to admire his handiwork for a bit before we get interrupted by the Browns going to the Super Bowl, and trust me, I think the Browns win this long overdue game because they really pushed the end zone, right? And I make fun of people for making cringe jokes, right? If you haven't walked away yet, congratulations, you're the best because I love this next scene. We finally get to hear what we can only describe as the film's main theme, and we see a hand slowly reach out from under God's robes. The first time I saw this, I think this is where I went, Okay, this movie might actually be worth watching. At some points in this review, I might just refer to her as Earth or Mother, mind you, because I'm also really lazy, and I think you get the idea who I'm talking about. I'm not talking about fucking Bill Clinton or anything like that, okay? Oh, and if you're curious as to how I know the names of the characters, well, I actually watched the film. Unlike some people here on YouTube who are stupid and don't bother to put the effort in and simply want to inject likes into their veins for validation. Anyways, Mother Earth takes her first steps into the world and begins to wander the house, which, goodness, let's take a minute and just let me gush, okay? This is such an awesome scene, man. The lighting, the movements, the music. This is just a truly memorable part of the movie for me and really resonates on some visceral level. Like, I think it's a combination of the desolation of the house, the calming music, and the air of wonder that Earth moves around with that really just, I don't know, it's like surreal art just done correctly. It's like if you mixed Aphex Twin and Burzum together and let David Firth get a hold of it, and it's fucking good. After a moment, Mother Earth notices the body of God and begins to give him an old-fashioned, which, yeah, I can't show that, so we'll let you fill in the blanks, okay? Until he eventually releases a load of lymph to quench your body's thirst. In all honesty, if you haven't guessed by now from the names and the imagery, there's a lot of connections to mythology and Begotten, so if you're taking your own notes, you're the best, because I'll give you a big free spoiler for what I view this scene's underlying message actually is. Immaculate Conception that I don't think YouTube will be okay with me showing, so be happy.
Be happy, be healthy.
So this is where the film jumps forward to a new location that I'll simply call The Forest, which is where a majority of the film actually takes place later on. I'll actually say now, I think the world of Begotten is its own thing, not necessarily Earth as we know it. It's likely a parallel to Earth, yeah, but I don't think you should view the film as, it's in Detroit, clearly, look at all the violence. Oh, and if you're one of those Tumblr or Reddit users that like to find creepy gifs to artificially grow some big brass balls, you might have actually glimpsed this next scene and not know it was actually from this film, but yeah. We see a coffin in the forest moving around and then Mother Earth standing near it, holding her stomach, which implies she's now pregnant from God, whose coffin disappears. We get a cool shot of Mother Earth walking to the edge of some water where she rubs her stomach and then begins to go into labor. You know, I'd also like to point out, I'm actually shocked that for all this movie's graphic elements, there wasn't some weird and elongated scene of Mother Earth giving birth. I don't know if that's merciful for the viewer's sake or because Marriage ran out of budget to make a fake baby fly out of the actress somehow. It's just an observation, it's not like I'm asking for it or anything. Oh, and take note, this is the first time in the film we get to see a shot of the sky, which in my mind symbolizes both the passage of time and something else that I'll talk about later in the analysis section. Trust me, if you're still one of those people that thinks this movie is just random imagery thrown together with no cohesion or thought, I'm sorry, but you clearly lack any critical thinking skills and have never broken down something like this before. Or you just don't care, I mean, that's fair too. After the sky shot, we're slowly introduced to a new character, Son of Earth, Flesh on Bone. I'll refer to this character as Earthchild, or Child moving forward because I'm like that and I go around renaming people just like I do in real life. Mother Earth births Earthchild somewhere in the forest and then leaves him naked, alone, and with nothing but his umbilical cord. Tough break, man. Child begins to writhe and wheeze, presumably drawing the attention of some new folks in town. Now, many people who've analyzed this film tend to call the side cast of characters nomads, and that's fair, I do too, but I feel a big problem with calling them all nomads is that there's actually quite a few different types in the film, and they all have different appearances, mannerisms, and what appears to be motives. In the credits, they're actually just listed as all other life, and are likely the other members of Marriage's theater group in costumes, so for these specific nomads, I'll refer to them as the priests because of their robes and hooded design. The priests encircle Earthchild and through some nonverbal communication they begin to take him away using his umbilical cord as a mock stretcher to help move him around out of the forest and into what I'll refer to as the waste. There is some really badass camera work here with this reflective shot, arguably probably my favorite shot in the entire film stylistically, right next to Mother Earth's birth scene. Yet I can see why people start to think this movie's kind of boring at this point. The priests eventually hoist Earthchild up somewhere in the waste along a small cliff, but they appear to be shocked when suddenly he starts to regurgitate some sort of fleshy mess. The priests begin to help the poor guy by taking the stuff from his mouth, and I mean, come on man, these guys are such bros, they even wipe his face off. Wish my parents did the same for me when I went through this phase in life. I can see why people think these nomads are malevolent, but I really don't read that. I always view this scene as concern mixed with curiosity, and while I really don't want my analysis spoiled too much, I really can't help but point this out because this was my honest-to-God gut reaction the first time seeing the film, but I'm curious as to how other people view this as well, so if you have your stories, feel free to post them. I might read them. No, I really will, trust me. Eventually, the priests begin to dress Earthchild with robes similar to their own, which, yeah, this goes about as easy as you'd expect, but hey, wandering around the wild with your bits flopping out just doesn't seem very smart, and obviously these guys had the right idea. You might get a sunburn or have a tick crawl into your urethra, and that's just not fun, man. The priests hoist Earthchild away and begin to tinker with a pot and fire, where they're interrupted again, this time with Earthchild now spitting all over the place because he's just a rude guy. Also, I'd like to point out that this scene is very open to interpretation and also very hard to parse and even make sense of what's going on, so I'll actually once again spoil my own views for you for better context. I think that the priests were more or less trying to indoctrinate him into their group and learn from him, but they're doing their best to tend to his needs at the same time. If we consider he's just been born, he's likely having issues trying to adjust to this world, and this world kind of sucks, to be honest. The flesh he gags out, well, I'll save that for later, but it is important. We get another neat shot of the priests holding Earthchild as they continue to parade him around the waist, and eventually time passes to where we see a new set of nomads that I'll just call the Mourners, who are holding a stretcher that presumably contains Earthchild's remains. Now, yet again, this is all up for interpretation to an extent, but I also view this scene as time passing and Earthchild has perished, with the Mourners cremating his remains based on the smoke that's present in this next scene. Like always, stick around for my views and all the symbolism and themes in the next video if you're interested, of course. There's a quick cut to Mother Earth and then we see Earthchild again, this time in the forest, in a pile of leaves, but now he's dressed in priestly robes and he appears more, stable, or as stable as humans appear in this film. Mother Earth appears out of frame and reunites with Child, placing his umbilical cord around his neck and dragging him behind her into the forest. We get yet another usage of the main theme, and I really love this scene because it's so bizarre and calming, thanks largely in part from the music. However, we see some new characters enter the film, and if it isn't clear from the ominous drone that takes over the main theme, yeah, these guys are nothing but trouble, and I'll be referring to them as the Stick Nomads for reasons that will be pretty apparent in a moment. The Stick Nomads hobble from the rocky waste and into the forest where they cross paths with Mother Earth and Child. I'm not gonna lie, despite the brutality that accompanies this scene, there's no doubt in my mind that this is one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, and the shot of the Stick Nomad's presumed leader observing the two with his companion, it's pure horror, man. Makes my hair stand on end because not only does this have an awesome framing in a very impressive way with the reveal shot, but this just is danger. You know it in your brain from the instincts ingrained into us from our real time as nomads, that this is predator behavior in both the modern and pre-modern definition. This is why I find this film so fascinating, because scenes like this elicit an instant real-life panic response, and you know whatever is going to happen next isn't going to end well, which, of course, it doesn't end well. Earthchild is clubbed over the head and sent into a seizure, and the Stick Nomads begin to prod at Mother Earth. Yes, Earthchild is manhandled and poked at, but nowhere near to the extent of Mother Earth, who's not only brutally violated, but eviscerated and killed. When Earthchild regains consciousness, he mourns the loss of his mother, but before long, a new set of nomads enter the equation, the Farmers as I'll call them, and yeah, by the way, that's the official, canonical as much as you can get name, that's also from Marriage himself, but I'll talk about that later. The Farmers then place Mother Earth's ravaged remains into a sack and take her away, leaving Earthchild to writhe helplessly in anger. We then cut to a scene of two farmers carrying a pot, presumably somewhere in the waste, but close enough to the forest to hear the ambiences associated to it. The farmers then begin to work with sacks of human remains, and if you're a hackney smooth-brain YouTuber, you think that what's clearly rainfall is semen. Yeah, smash that dislike bar, by the way, it's what gets me off. I really like this next scene, just showing the farmers doing their stuff too, because it just feels like the least distressing thing in the film, and just, it's got this kind of trance to it that makes you want to know what they're up to, because, I mean, these guys appear to have their shit together, for the most part. It's pretty ambiguous at first, but they're actually pulling flesh from the sacks and placing them into the pots. Like I said, least distressing scene, but much like the Stick Nomad scene, I think the overall vibe of the scene just conveys so much about these guys, and it's all done in a very subtle way, and it's really well done, and it's a good testament to nonverbal acting. All your senses really have to strain to make sense of what's going on visually, but just the little details really make the scene stand out. You begin by seeing the farmers arrive, and then you get curious about what they're doing, then you hear them tearing flesh out, then the sound of the flies make you imagine the decay and the rancidity of what they're doing. I'm not making it seem bigger than it is. This is all just stuff your brain locks in when you're forced to rely on missing information, and it's a big part of what makes theater, and not film, such a unique and interesting medium. Also, if you're curious, I think this shot of the river is not only a cool parallel of the scene where the priests take Earthchild, but I swear to God that has to be a roll of toilet paper in the water. I don't know what else it could be. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed this before, but I have no idea what else this could be. I'm just saying. I also really like this shot of the big hose. It just gives me Eraserhead vibes, and it's just pretty cool. I mean, just for that noise alone that it makes. The final act of the film shows a ravaged, windy part of what I assume to be the waste, where we get a cool and stylish shot of Earthchild being an absolute unit and braving this hostile place alone. I'm not gonna lie, that shot of him worming his way across the screen is incredibly cool, and it really sells the idea that the shit he's doing is dangerous, but he's determined more than likely to find Mother Earth again. Sadly, this is Begotten, and one of the farmers captures Earthchild and stuffs him into a bag, just like his mother. Our wormy friend is bludgeoned to death and taken by the farmers, where he's processed off screen, just like all the other bodies these guys have gathered, and if the farmer name hasn't made sense yet, it's about to. Don't worry. A storm begins to brew and rain, not semen by the way, begins to cause flooding to the land, where we then cut to the farmers digging holes and packing what we can only assume is the flesh of the dead into the land, presumably to be watered by the oncoming flood. Finally, we cut to some flowers dying, and then new life sprouts from the ground to that wonderful main theme. This is just beautiful, man. It reminds me of the stuff we had to watch in, like, science class in middle school, but that's kind of why I like it so much. The camera then cuts to Mother Earth dragging Son of Earth back out of the forest, and then a shot of a skull buried in the ground is shown while smoke passes over. Another shot reveals what looks like a charred torso in the ground, and then our final image of the film before the credits roll is a wide shot of the forest. And congratulations, you made it. Also, before I do my final thoughts, I want whoever's in charge of Begotten's Wikipedia page specifically for the plot section to be banned from posting and someone to rewrite this bullshit. Firstly, the priest nomads don't reveal their intentions and throw Earthchild into the fire pit. Last time I checked, they simply carried him around, and then there was a time lapse, and then they immolated him after he presumably died. That, sentence is just bullshit. Secondly, the nomads return and attack? No, that's also bullshit. It's pretty clear these are not the same characters from the previous scenes. Their entire getup, like their attire, their demeanor, their posture, their tools, it's all just totally different. They're just completely different characters, you fucking idiot. Get your eyes checked. Thirdly, the stick nomads knock Earthchild into a seizure during the rape scene. I highly doubt he watched helplessly nearby. He was either unconscious, seizing, or a combination of both when all this happened. This is all just inaccurate as well, because the stick nomads are shown to also be on top of a timber pile for most of the scene, and the last shot we see of Earthchild before all this, he's flailing on the rocks below the timber pile, so what the fuck is your excuse for that, right? Fourthly, and yeah, whoever, edited this article is that bad at their job, the farmers don't return to abduct Earthchild, they find him in the wastes, not in the same spot where they took his mother. It's pretty damn clear that they simply found him by happenstance, because it's implied he wormed his way for quite a distance before he was captured. Fifthly, yeah, I know. I don't know where in God's name the person that wrote this article got crushing their bones and placing them into clay-filled jars. We do see a farmer hold a bone, likely as a callback to the start of the film, but I don't see anyone in the next scenes crush bones. The farmers use sticks to wedge flesh into the ground. I don't know where in the Sam hell whoever wrote this shit got clay-filled jars from. How do you know it's clay-filled? Were you there to confirm it's clay and not dirt? Or, gee, I don't know, it couldn't be fucking flesh, the thing they're shoving into the holes. Also, what jars? You mean the edge of the holes that were likely a container the actors were smashing the fake flesh into? Yeah, I can say it's possible they're smashing the flesh into a vessel of some kind, sure, but I'm more inclined to believe that that vessel is more or less there to prevent whatever the meat was made out of to not seep into the ground. Sixthly, montage of photographs depicting the robed god is shown. Excuse me? What? Where the fuck did you pull that from, your rancid ass? I've scrubbed each frame of this film numerous times, especially the ending scenes, and there is not any frame depicting God from this film, like from the intro. Like, where did you get that shit from? Wikipedia? Oh wait. Like, seriously, this is even a fucking joke. I'll show you the tween frames where you can clearly see where the film was actually cut, and not any of it shows God from the intro of the film, like, at all. Seriously, who the fuck came up with this? Look, I'm willing to admit as well, it's possible there are bootlegs of the film that contain rearranged imagery, but no, I don't think so. I mean, I'm never wrong. But, like, come on, man, if you're gonna half-ass an article of what you consider an important cult film, at least have the fucking decency to come down from your high before you start writing what's factually incorrect. The jackass who wrote this plot summary didn't even mention the fact the film ends on the walking shot, skull shot, torso shot, and then the forest shot. I'll even award the writer bonus fuck-up points for them writing wandering through a forested path when the actual shot composition is actually devoid of any characters. Like, this dog shit plot synopsis right here as I'm recording this video is exactly why I despise Wikipedia, and do you want to know why? Some moron who wants to look edgy and cool can just glance at that summary, not watch the movie, and try to talk to someone like me about it, and let's be real, I'm an ultra Chad and I get off on putting people down over small trivial things. You can call it gatekeeping if you're stupid, but realistically, it's like if you went up to someone ultra religious who's memorized every passage of the Bible and just started cliff noting shit, they're gonna notice it and they're gonna call you out on it, and I'm that guy because I have nothing better to do with my free time. So pretty please, with sugar on top, clean the fucking article up, because I'm not gonna do it, and I'll just sit here and check the Wikipedia page every day after this review goes up and wait to see if it changes. I've got time, man. Anyways, enough being petty. Begotten is, like I said at the start, a movie I love to hate and hate to love. While I love the bizarre nature of the film and the style it has going for it, I feel something is missing in a few places, and it really doesn't make all the pieces of the puzzle click for me in the right way. Like, for every cool camera angle, there's something small I don't like. A good example is the first scene of the film with God. I love the trippy crossfades when he's introduced because it gives it this almost ethereal quality, like he's materializing into the interior of the house, but the scene where his hand is dragging on the wall? Realistically, that's his left hand and it's somewhere in his lap in the scene prior before the close-up of his wounds. I mean, that's a nitpick. That's fair. But let's take the main issue I think most people have with this film, the pace. The start of the film is arguably the most gripping portion for most people, but after that, most viewers tend to say they lose interest or that the movie drags on for way too long. I can sort of agree, the first time I watched it because it felt like 5 hours of just people wandering around on rocks, but this is a film that's not meant to be a Marvel movie full of explosions, rushed plot holes, and stupid one-liners. It's a film that's got a lot going on under the surface, writhing around to get your brain going, and trust me, I know why this is, but I'll address it later. It just doesn't seem to matter how I try to argue with this film. God's the coolest character design in the entire film. He's not in it enough. His death has subtext to the God is dead, we kill them quote. The mourner nomads only show up for 2 seconds. Why don't we see them for longer than this one scene? Is it really important when the movie isn't about them? Why is there only one main song in the film? The one music track is memorable and it sticks with you more and it's thematic to themes of life. Why do people walk like they're tripping on meth? There's subtext to all the different nomadic people and how they correlate to nature and the passage of time. You see what I mean? For every pointless, stupid, frivolous, or even completely valid complaint I can think of, I can fire off at least 1 or 2 reasons to defend the film and vice versa. If I'm honest, I really like this movie because I used to be a theater student and I have a lot of love and respect for fringe and outside art, but I mean, look at me. I am the target demographic for this movie, there's no doubt about it. If I saw this shit back in 1989, I'd probably say, it's super neat, fuck you for thinking it's weird, you just don't get it, you're sheep, and then my parents would kick me out. I'm gonna be honest, one reason this movie strikes me so hard is because of my own artistic style, based on chiaroscuro, monochromatic colors, and surreal visuals. Like, you could take my early art from high school and slam it between frames of this movie, and it would really probably not look too far out of place. Think about it. If you took the visuals from this film and synced them up to some Atmo Black or nu metal, well, we'll talk about that later, by the way. I can tell there's so much love that Merhige and his production crew put into this damn thing, and I can look past all the weird graphic garbage and say, yeah, this is what outside art looks like made by a guy that loves to make stuff. On the other hand, I think this movie is extremely pretentious and other films do it way better. Merhige was likely inspired by Eraserhead, which, yeah, holy fuck, that's an infinitely better film. I always can strongly recommend Eraserhead, not just because it's in my top films of all time, but because it's a perfect starter film for someone wanting to get into avant-garde art. Eraserhead is trippy, yeah, there's no doubt about it, but I think that the messages and visuals are much more easily digestible than the ones here in Begotten. Alright, this isn't Jackson Pollock levels of tomfuckery, hell no, it's not even close, but if you show this to someone who is skeptical of theater and art people, they'd likely just say, yeah, that's fucking weird, kick a football, nerd, and probably just not care. The visual style isn't for everyone, and the contents of the film certainly aren't either. I know there's a lot of actually deep and insightful effort put into the visual imagery of the film, but I just think people will dismiss this as borderline snuff and just be cringe about it. But I'm also aware of how condescending I sound when I say, obviously there's Christian mythology infused into this film based on X, Y, and Z. Because, yeah, to the average person, they're gonna look at this film and go, holy shit, that bush!
I like a big bush.
And start scrolling through TikTok like a fucking moron and forget all about the film in a matter of minutes. It's like Unit 731, LSD Dream Emulator, Gigi Allen, or Chris Chan. You can find these sorts of topics floating around, but the people that have looked into these topics and know their shit are usually well-versed and mainly pretty insular people. I think the cool kids call it the iceberg and make cringe-inducing videos and farm likes off of it, but it's true. Begotten is the true definition of a cult film. You either know about it, or you don't, and if you know about it, you're likely going to have good opinions of it, mixed, and if you don't, you'll likely just think it's the movie where a man shits on his feet because it's some sellout on YouTube making a disturbing and most sacrilegious film ever made clickbait uninformed video. It's because I hate the concept of uprooting and exploiting this kind of stuff. Let's say you're into a band that you really like, you know the history down to the most pointless shit that nobody cares about, and then suddenly someone comes along who starts talking about blanket statements that are incorrect, and you know it's wrong. Doesn't that bother you? When you ask them where they got their information, and it's some form of bullshit YouTube video or a TikTok video or some clickbait article on BuzzFeed, you start to feel defensive and resentful in a way. I'll bring it down to an even more basic level that most people should be able to understand, okay? Say you're like me and you love spiders because your brain is broken and wrong. Just how aggravating do you think it is for me and people who've studied spiders for years to hear someone say, yeah, daddy longlegs are the most poisonous spider on the planet and their fangs are too small to break your skin, lol. Like, I cringe writing that and saying that because none of that is true, but it still gets spread around by idiots somehow. For me, Begotten isn't something I'm personally all that attached to, but the theater culture and art side of me, well, yeah, that's part of who I am. So when I hear someone say something like, wow, this movie's fucked up, therefore the people that watched it are equally as fucked up, or wow, this movie looks stupid, only an autistic on Tumblr would try to find deeper meaning in it, it really gets to me. It's just arrogant and stupid to try and bring films like this into the mainstream light and make completely bullshit clickbait claims, like, most sacrilegious film ever made. Oh yeah? How? What in Begotten is considered sacrilegious when it's not even about Christianity exclusively? Is it because there's a character with the name God killing himself and you want to capitalize off that? I'd love to see you try and take a spin at the narrative of Begotten as an anti-religious film, but that might actually require some fucking effort, right? It's the most disturbing movie of all time. Why? Yeah, it's graphic, I'll give you that, but is it because you just see gore and don't get the context? Is a movie with themes of the cyclical nature of the planet and humankind disturbing to you? By that logic, those ham-fisted ads about throwing your trash away so you don't kill the earth should scare the ever-loving shit out of you. One of the major themes in Begotten is actually humankind ravaging the planet and it needing to be protected and treated with respect, but I guess that's too hard to discern, right? It's like when I was a teenager, I got told by people I was a piece of shit for listening to Marilyn Manson or Slipknot because those bands were satanic, like, Brian Warner is not a Satanist, and not a single one of his hundreds of songs promotes Satanism. Brian is also considered an honorary member of the Church of Satan, but not full-blown indoctrinated member. It was because of his friendship with Anton LaVey, who, by the way, admitted numerous times that his brand of Satanism was to use the allegory of Satan as a stand-in for self, and not the biblical being. Also, LaVey was a massive con man, so there's that. Also, how the holy fuck is Slipknot satanic? Is it because they wear masks, say bad words, and their music is loud? Did you think their music was satanic because their logo has 9 sides to it because they have 9 members in their band? Did you think that because you heard the words 666 in the Heretic Anthem and don't know what the song is actually about? Or are you just going off that ignorant and stupid assumption that it's different, therefore the people that like it are different and bad? Because that's exactly the kind of ideology that the band is against, and the kind of thinking that makes people like me appreciate their music and message even more. Begotten is not a film that's pointless. It's not a film that you should exploit for likes and views. It's not a film that's perfect, that's for sure. But it's a product of passion and love for theater, which I think makes it unique as a cult film. Do I want people to look into it? Yeah, of course, why not? It's art, and art's meant to be viewed. But consider why you're looking into the film. Do you have interest in experimental films? Do you want to get into theater, film, or make something that's inspired by the film? Do you want to watch it to dig for answers because you're bored and want something to kind of tickle that little part of your brain to make you happy? Or are you watching it for some sort of validation or dare? You know, you can call me a gatekeeper, that's fine, but the next video in the series will prove to you why I feel so strongly towards this movie and all the themes in it. Whether I stared too deeply into the abyss is entirely up for debate, but I'd like to think that this film impacted me in a positive way, honestly. So, thanks for watching so far, and I'll see you in the next one, where I discuss the themes of Begotten, as well as the in-depth analysis into each scene and how it all ties together. Or I looked way too deep, and now I'm brain damaged from watching this film over a dozen times in a handful of months.